Welcome to the Burnout Recovery Podcast, a guiding resource dedicated to healthcare professionals on their journey to overcoming burnout. Spearheaded by Dr. Joe Braid, a certified professional coach and rehabilitation physician.
Hi everyone, it's Dr. Joe Braid here and welcome back to podcast episode 151. Yes, we have passed the big 150 podcast episodes. I hope you heard that celebration episode last week. And today I really want to talk about something that I know so many people can wrangle with, and I certainly have done as well. It's dealing with bringing work home after a day in the office, a day in the hospital, a day in clinic. And it was really my husband who helped me to realize what I was choosing to do in the evenings that I just really hadn't questioned in myself. And when we think about burnout and who might notice that we're in burnout first, it's often our partners, the people that we live with. They see the shift, they see the change, they see the spiral that we go into. And I was so grateful that my husband chatted about this with me actually when we were on holiday. So I've shared quite a lot about my burnout journey through the different episodes in this podcast, and you'll get a little snippet of it and some aspects that I think are so relatable to others. And that's what I wanted to share with you in this podcast episode around bringing work stress home. So I think this will really resonate for you, whether you are your own boss running your own clinic practice like I was, or if you're dealing with a manager or a boss or somebody else in a more senior position to you in the workplace. So if you picture this, I'm walking through the front door after a long day in clinic seeing patients. The kids, that is 3 sons, are excited to see me. We've got dinner ready to go. But mentally, I'm still completely at work. I'm thinking about the complex case from earlier. Have I done all the investigations that we need to here? Is there anything I've missed? Is the patient clear on the next steps of what they need to do? Are they clear when we're next going to catch up? And I'm also mentally rehearsing tomorrow's schedule. Does this sound familiar to you at all? So I did this for months. I ran this clinic for 4 years, and I would be physically present, sitting at the dinner table or helping with kids reading after dinner and prepping them for bed. But my mind was somewhere else entirely. My family was getting the shell of me, not the real me. So then we were away, out of home, staying somewhere else. And I remember my husband having a chat with me one evening, and he just said, you know, when you come home after a day at clinic, do you actually need to do any work after a day at work? Like, is there something specific you need to get done? And I paused and I really thought about it. And more often than not, the answer was actually no. There was no urgent documentation, no patient calls to return, no actual work tasks that really needed my attention. But there I was, carrying all this mental weight and this rumination, this thinking about work anyway. Because to others, it can really seem like we're working even when we're not actually working. And, you know, that revelation hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband was right. I was bringing all the stress, the mental load, and the worry home, even when there was really nothing I could do about it until the next day. So let's go through some of the neuroscience behind this. I do like to illustrate these stories with the science behind them. And this concept is rumination, which I'm sure you're familiar with. These mental loops where your brain keeps cycling through the same thoughts over and over. And there's a real reason why this happens. It's called the Zeigarnik effect, found by a psychologist a number of decades back, something where we remember unfinished tasks more vividly than completed ones. This study was actually done in waiters. Waiters could remember complex table orders for clients or patrons who had not yet paid, as opposed to the ones who might have had a complex dinner order but had completely paid. So you can see that is that unfinished task in the waiter's mind. Here we have it also in healthcare. When I'd left the office, my brain was still trying to solve those open loops from the day. My prefrontal cortex, that part that handles planning and problem solving, was really still very much on, keeping my stress hormones elevated. Because our brains can't really tell the difference between a real threat and an angry email from a difficult colleague, or something that's outstanding that we're concerned about. Both trigger the same alarm system, really keeping us in that vigilant mental state, even when we're supposed to be relaxing out of hours. Then we can become cognitively overloaded, and I've done podcast episodes on this before, juggling too many tasks and too many decisions, and our working memory gets saturated. And then that really impacts on our default mode network, which is meant to be active when we're sleeping and resting, but that becomes dysregulated and we have all that broken sleep. And these are so many features of somebody in burnout, with that overthinking, irritability, insomnia, waking early, just to name a few. There certainly can be other reasons for that, but that's what I have commonly seen as a slew of features in people I've worked with in burnout. So I think so many of us can get trapped here around the bringing work home area, whether we are business owners or we're employees. Often mistakenly thinking that caring about our work means we should be thinking about it constantly, and confusing mental rumination with dedication. So now I've got a few strategies that you could use to help with any rumination you might notice yourself doing after you've finished a day at work. I've developed what I call the mental clock off practice. So before I walk through my front door, I can really ask myself, is there anything I actually need to work on tonight? If the answer is yes, a genuine task with a real deadline, then I can make a plan for when I'll do it and for how long. But if the answer is no, which is most of the time, then I can take 3 deep breaths. I really like to do a super slow exhale to really help engage the parasympathetic nervous system, and tell myself work is done for the day. I am clocking off mentally. And this is really to signal that safety to my nervous system and help my brain shift from problem-solving mode to recovery mode. I think the real strategy with any of these points I'm going to share with you is that repetition really helps, because then your brain becomes more familiar with the strategy you're employing or engaging. If we just do things once, it's brand new that one time. But if we can repeat things and have that familiarity with our brain, these things are more likely to stick. So here's one strategy, the brain dump transition. Before leaving work, spend a short amount of time, that might be 5 minutes, writing down everything that's on your mind as you wrap up the workday. That might be unfinished tasks, tomorrow's priorities, or random thoughts. This gives your brain permission to stop holding on to everything. You're essentially telling your prefrontal cortex, it's okay, we've captured this information, you can let go now. Secondly, a physical transition ritual. I invite you to create a deliberate decompression sequence when you arrive home. For example, changing out of your work clothes, washing your hands while taking 3 deep breaths. So there's a lot of sensory input there that I'm doing. Some people might want to take a short walk around the block before going inside. And the key here is making it consistent and mindful. Your brain will then be learning to associate these actions with safety and transition. This helps activate our parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest mode, while helping your body recognize the shift from the workspace to the personal space. Strategy 3 is the worry window technique. And this one's brilliant. So it's setting aside 10 to 15 minutes immediately after work to intentionally think about and write down any lingering work concerns, then mentally close the window or shut the laptop until tomorrow. This can really satisfy your brain's need to process unfinished business while containing rumination to a specific time frame, not letting it continue boundaryless. After your worry window, then I suggest you engage in a completely different sensory experience. This could be listening to music, petting your dog, your cat, whatever animal you might have at home, cooking dinner, or maybe doing some stretching. And this sensory shift really helps redirect your neural pathways away from those work thoughts and towards present moment awareness. And wrapping up with strategy 4, I've got the present moment anchor. Choose something in your home environment that becomes your anchor to the present. So maybe it's a smell of something cooking, or maybe it's the smell of a candle you have at home. Maybe it's something about your children and the noise that they inevitably make, or it's connecting with your pet. When you notice your mind drifting back to work, consciously redirect your attention to this anchor. And it's really like training your brain to come back home, literally and figuratively. So let's think about how these different strategies can work, whether you're an employee or you are your own boss. So if you do have a boss, you might worry about boundaries, but we know we do, certainly in Australia, have new legislation around when you're out of work and responsiveness time to out of work requests. Certainly, not doing any email after 7 p.m. or maybe even earlier for you. If you have a work phone, putting that away in another room. Often, truly urgent situations are really rare, and you'll handle them better if you are mentally recharged. And if we're our own bosses, we do have to be more intentional because no one else will help enforce these boundaries for us. So that's really growing that inner trust that you've got your own back and you will keep that boundary with yourself if you are your own boss. Reflecting back on what I shared at the beginning and bringing in those boundaries for myself and those transitions from work to home, the change actually was really effective from just a few practices, really. My family got the real me back and my work also improved too. When we are better rested, we can be more creative and efficient during the actual work hours. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one of these strategies that I've shared, the one that resonates the most with you, and commit to it for just 5 days. And here's a question I really want you to sit with. What would change in your relationships with your family, your friends, even with yourself, if you could be fully present when you're not at work? What are you missing out on when your mind is always somewhere else? Your family deserves the real you, and you deserve to be fully present for what matters most. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of the Burnout Recovery Podcast. If this resonated with you and you want to share it with somebody else, please do so. If you want to give me any feedback with a review, that would be so welcome too. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you next week. Ready to take the next step in your burnout recovery journey? Visit drjoebraid.com for free resources, all 150 plus podcast episodes, and information about my keynote speaking. Links are in the show notes. Your well-being matters. Protect the asset that is you.